Welcome to the Domain Name Wire podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Alleman, and this is episode number 538. This week, ICANN is holding its annual policy forum in Prague. A big topic will be the next round of top-level domains. ICANN published what could be the final version of the applicant guidebook for the next round, which should kick off in April of next year. It's a 400-page document, which is very heavy reading. But on today's show, Christa, Taylor, and I will unpack some of the changes from the last time companies were able to apply for new top-level domains. We discuss how much it costs, the new backup string option for applicants, and the applicant support program. Christa also explains where she thinks some of the demand in this round will come from, as well as how many applications we might expect. First, a word from our sponsor. Our sponsor is Salve.com and its low-cost pricing for domain transfers. Transfer your domains to Salve and save. Transfer.com's for only $9.65, .io for $44.99, and .org for $9.75. Plus, Salve doesn't raise your prices a lot at renewal time. Right now, .com renewals are only $10.15. Start transferring your domains to Salve by going to salve.com/DNW/transfer. That's sav.com/DNW/transfer. Let's run through some news in the domain business from the past week before we chat with Christa. First up, GoDaddy has announced a new tier of its domain discount club. Until now, there have been two tiers that were differentiated primarily by pricing. The new tier, which is called Pro, is designed for domain investors. It will include many of the features the premium plan has already offered, such as access to Domain Academy and all of its tools, self-brokering at Afternic, and GoDaddy Auctions membership. The new Pro level will be $360 per year compared to $240 right now. But domain investors won't pay that price just yet. They're going to get a free upgrade to the Pro plan, and then the next time that plan renews, they'll still pay the original $240. After that, at their next renewal, they will have to pay the full $360 price tag. If investors choose to stay on the premium plan, they'll pay more for domains than they currently do. The .com price on that plan will be $11.99 compared to $10.99 on the Pro plan. So if you have 120 or more .com domains, you will save money by upgrading to the Pro plan. In other news, car maker Tesla has won a cyber squatting case against a Russian scammer who registered 52 domains, including its brands. One of the sites included Tesla's trademark and a picture of Elon Musk. It promised people who sent cryptocurrency to a particular wallet that they'd get twice their money back. Other domains were used for phishing. The .cloud top-level domain changed its premium domain model last week. It used to operate on a high-low model, meaning that you paid a higher price for the first year of a premium registration, but then regular prices after that. Going forward, registrants will pay the higher price each year. Existing premium registrations will be grandfathered in, however. The registry also increased its wholesale price from $15 to $20 per year. The last time it changed prices was in 2021, when it increased prices from $7.50 to $15. Did you know that Nominet's dispute resolution service, which is like UDRP but for .uk domains, has an appeals process? Well, there was a recent appeal with an interesting result. iManage LLC had won a dispute against the domain manage.co.uk. The domain owner filed the appeal saying he was very ill at the time of the dispute and couldn't respond. With the information he provided, the panel not only reversed the original decision ordering the domain transferred, but it also found reverse domain name hijacking. The panel was particularly distressed that iManage doubled down before finally agreeing that the domain wasn't used in bad faith. The panel said it couldn't force iManage to pay the domain owner's legal costs, but it would be the right thing to do. Finally, the .top domain name registry is back in ICANN's good graces. About a year after ICANN sent it a breach notice, the parties have agreed that .top is back in compliance with the registry agreement. ICANN said it will closely monitor the company going forward for how it handles abuse complaints. There's more news at domainnamewire.com, but now let's chat with Christa. My guest this week is Christa Taylor, co-founder of TLDz. Christa, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Andrew. Always a pleasure to be here.
So I emphasized the Z at the end of that because it's TLDz. I remember running into you at, I don't know, maybe it was an ICANN conference. And I said, what are you up to? And he said, oh, TLDs. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course you're working on TLDs. That's just you've been working on for a long time. And then I was like, oh, Z, TLDz or Z for our European friends. You've worked on top level domains for a long time. So tell me how TLDs came together.
So TLDs came together with a couple of us going, hey, there's a gap in the marketplace that we really want to focus on, which is realizing the value out of their TLDs. I've been doing this for a long time now. And it's like, what is it that I really love about all of this? And that's really just getting back to the core of it, which is these are little assets and let's get some value out of it and do some really cool stuff with them. So let's focus on that.
And so with TLDs, you're working with clients that are interested in applying for a top level domain in the next round?
Yep, along with some who bought TLD in the last round and suddenly going, something, let's use this, show me how. So I'm actually just working or I've been heads down on the launch of .mobile with Dish Networks in your back alley. And so I've been heads down on doing the data crunching on that part of it. And then that will be hitting GA in the fall with .mobile.
Yeah, it's interesting to see here. We're finally getting to the new top-level domain round, right? Let's call it the 2026 round. And companies are still launching domains from what I generally refer to as the 2012 round. Maybe it was even before that, but that's when the reveal was. It's pretty crazy to think about that and how long it's taken some companies to come around and launch these. I know Amazon has launched some this year after sitting on them for a long time as well.
Yeah. And, it's kind of unfortunate. Sometimes that's the problem in the process of you didn't know why you applied or somebody had a great idea. And then because this doesn't take 1 week to get one and to launch it, people move on. And then suddenly there's this little thing and it's just sitting there and nobody knows what to do with it because that person or that team is eventually lost or they're doing something else and there it sits. So it's really great to be able to take one out going, this is really cool, to reignite it and get people excited about it because they have some really great strings. So it's fun.
The long time that we've waited here for the next round of top level domains is interesting because a lot of people early after the first round were like, oh man, I missed out, or I should have done this, or I should have done that differently, that sort of thing. And now we're finally getting there. So ICANN has released its final applicant guidebook with requests for feedback. And there are some placeholders in there as well. A lot of them, to be fair, are dates, like this is going to launch at this time point. But we're looking at first half of next year to be able to apply for top level domains. But companies that are interested in doing it, you can't just wait till the last minute to apply. So what are some of the things that companies should be doing now that are interested in applying for top level domains? And I use the term companies loosely here. I mean, this could be a domain investor. This could be a big brand. This could be Identity Digital, a big player in the space.
Yeah, I think it goes right back to the same thing as last round. Is if you're going to apply for one of these, let's think through it. Like the guidebook is nice and big. It's got 400 pages of lots of details in there, but you need to go really back to the whole beginning part of it of why do you want one? What are the benefits it's going to provide? What's the business purpose of it? And how are you going to do that little thing called ROI on it? And instead of just focusing on the application process, the application is really just a means to an end. At the end of the day, you have this little business, whether it's, Joe's coffee shop on the corner, or you have a virtual business. That's like the starting point where you actually need to get going on your business, to spend all the time and energy to launch it. And I know people think it was virtual and you just press a button. It doesn't work like that. It actually takes a lot to go, okay, what is the premium list? And does my string make sense? Let's go right back to it and go, does this make sense? Should I be applying? Does this make sense for me? And when is my payback period?
And these are not cheap. And so I want to talk about some of the things that are different this time around versus last time around. One is the price, right?
Yep. So we went from we're now at 227,000 versus 185,000 plus.
Plus being a big part of this, right? That's just the application fee. Their legal fees are typically consultants, or you're doing it in-house, which is taking your time, which costs money. Although I was a bit surprised that the price went up rather than down. Obviously, there's been inflation in the past decade, but it seems like to me, this suggests that a lot of the work that happened in the first round, since this is quote unquote cost recovery, was just thrown out the window. Everything started from scratch. What are your thoughts on that?
Obviously, I was somewhat surprised, just like everyone else. I was expecting it to go down. I was expecting that we'd use some of the same systems that were already there. And I also don't think we need to rebuild it to this extent. If the current projections are on 1,000, I can put on my accounting hat and go, yeah, we need to be conservative, but is 1,000 really being conservative or too conservative to punch up the value there or the price? On the flip side, we did spend a lot of time in SubPro going, well, wait a sec, there needs to be a better refund policy. So if, so many applications are received, we need a really great way to return that money back to applicants, ideally efficiently. And so I didn't really see that in the guidebook, in this version of it, where it actually should go into explaining more of how that works, especially if there are more than 1,000 applications.
You're saying if the revenue, basically if ICANN, since it's built on a cost recovery basis, if they do turn a big profit, should some of that go back to the applicants?
Yeah, supposed to, right?
And this time around, too, another big difference means that ICANN might be getting a lot of money from auctions, right? So the first time around, they said, hey, go, if 2 or more companies apply for the same thing, which they did for a lot, .app, .web, .music, that sort of thing. They said, see if you can resolve this issue amongst yourselves. If you can't, then we will hold an auction, and then we'll hold on to the money for some unspecified future use. And in reality, that's been used, 1, to plug a budget hole at ICANN, and then 2, for part of this grant program they had, which they just now in 2025 announced the first recipients of $9 million total out of this piggy bank of over $100 million. But this time they're saying, no, you can't do that. You can't resolve these disputes amongst yourselves. You have to do an auction through ICANN. What are your thoughts on that decision?
I don't like the whole piggy bank idea where it's just going to ICANN sitting there as though it's some kind of not-for-profit distribution system. That's really not their function from my perspective. On the flip side, I understand why we can't do private auctions, because then we just have so many applicants just coming in just for the sole purpose of kind of gaming the system.
For losing, yeah. Winning by losing.
Yeah, you want to be the biggest loser in this instance because you're going to win millions of dollars in some cases.
Yeah, so for people that aren't familiar, these private auctions, how they were generally set up is that if you were the losing bidder, you shared the money that the winning bidder paid. So there were arguments made that a lot of companies on purpose applied for domains, lost those auctions so that they could get paid off. And then frankly, kudos to those companies for thinking about that, if that was their plan. But now that people have seen that and seen how much money you could make from that, the thinking was that this next round, there would be a lot of people that came in and applied, say, just for .crypto, because they know that's going to be a popular string. That's right.
Exactly. And the other part that's also changed in there is we're not allowed to talk about it now either, which makes it a little bit significantly different from the last round, because at least when you're in an auction set, we could all sit around the table and go, okay, I'm in this auction set with you. You're in this auction set with him. I'm in this one and that one. I'll let you take this one and you can take that one. And we're all winners in this. And let's try to work together and create that synergy as we go forward. Whereas now it's strictly prohibited that we're unable to talk. So it's really promoting it. If you're in a contention set, you're going to auction. And that's really scary for applicants.
Sure. One of the things that has changed this time too is they're saying, okay, you can't do these private resolutions, but you can create a backup string. And so, for example, let's say that you and I both apply for, we're looking at a monitor right now. Let's say .monitor. And we're like, someone else might apply for that. I don't want to get into an auction. In case someone else applies for that, I'm going to go with a backup. So let's say you choose .Christa, I choose .Andrew. Then after reveal day, I'm like, oh, shoot, Christa applied for .monitor too. I know, she's got a ton of money that she's going to put after this. I'm going to lose that auction. So I can go to my backup now to .Andrew. Now, the interesting thing is You could also look at that and say, oh, there's no way I'm going to beat Andrew. So I'm going to go to .Christa. And then the way it works, it's possible that no one ends up getting .monitor, right? Because we could both select our backup. And again, there's no room for conversation there. A good string, or at least one that's in a contingent set, could go unclaimed at the end of the day, and two companies could end up getting their backup, which is kind of an interesting. I'll be curious to see how this plays out in reality.
Yeah, I think when you talk to people, everyone kind of has that first love. They have, this is the string, and they're really in love with it. And they really don't want to do an alternative string. But on the flip side, they're very nervous about going to auction because they don't want to spend maybe 10 or 20 or whatever millions of dollars. It's a really different kind of mindset. And the other perspective that it doesn't really consider is that, okay, my business plan was .monitor. Now, my business plan for .Christa is actually very different. And then what I haven't quite figured out is when I do my application and I submit it to ICANN, I only have to update things around the string, not my business plan. So one, I could be like, okay, .monitor is going to do, 1 million registrations. And Chris is going to do 100.
It's not going to be as popular.
No, right?
Yeah.
It's like, Andrew, you're going to do the million, but I'm a
of course.
right?
And so, one of the interesting things thinking about this, obviously you'd choose something somewhat similar. So let's say instead of .monitor, it's .screen or something like that. However, you also can't do plurals and singulars this time around. So it's not like, can't say instead of .monitor, I'm going to do .monitors, because those would end up in a contingent set anyway. So if you get to reveal day, oh, someone else has applied for this domain, my backup is the plural or my backup is the singular. That's not going to work. And then you also need to think about that backup domain you choose, because if anyone else has applied for that, or if they put it as their backup, you can't use it. There's a whole lot of game theory here. Do I go after a bad backup string, or do I just lose the auction? Do I just withdraw my application? So let's put it this way. It'll be very interesting to see how this plays out in practice.
Yeah, I haven't done a decision tree on it. It would be actually really cool to actually draw it out. Yes, no, and you keep going down. It's like, and this is the string I'm going to choose.
And so then you also think about portfolio applicants. Like Nova Registry has announced they plan to apply for about 200 top-level domains. In a lot of cases, they might have lots of alternative strings that they're interested in, but they can only choose one per string they apply for, right? They can't say, hey, we've applied for 200. These are 200 backups. Let us choose one from these based on what we see on reveal day. So I think it's going to be a challenge for organizations like that. I imagine Identity Digital will apply for a lot. I've heard of others in this situation. How do you choose a backup there? And then do you actually choose to go with that backup or not?
That's a challenge. And you really have to do your research on it. Does it still really make sense? And really plan it through. So I could see people doing 2 applications just to cover their basis on it. But for the most part, surprisingly, a lot of people are like, no, here's this and my backup is that. And they're really concerned on it. I spend a lot of time talking people in circles on it because they just are so nervous about it. That's the unfortunate part. And especially, if you tie it into the fee refund. And so I think you want to probably see more applications, but with the fee refund and people potentially losing so much money so quickly on it is a deterrent to even apply because they're afraid of going to auction and they don't want to lose so much money in such a short period of time.
In that refund, is you get a different percentage of your application refunded depending on when you withdraw, right? If it's before this point, before I'm just reveal, before auction, that sort of thing, there are different percentages you get back.
Yeah, so I think the main one most are concerned about is they get 65% back, and that's 10 days after the string confirmation day.
Which is when you find out what everyone applied for.
Yeah, which is a loss of $80,000 in a couple months. That's a little bit hard to swallow for most companies. Just to go, okay, I want to apply for this. And if it's in the contention set, we're out. So yeah, it's a real concern.
So another thing this time is the applicant support program has been extended. And this is for, let's call them needy applicants. Maybe it's an NGO, maybe it's a nonprofit that wants to go for a domain and they don't have much money, or they're from a an under-resourced part of the world, that sort of thing. I was kind of surprised to see, in addition to getting funding for their application, this also extends to the auctions. One of these applicants who has support could get up to 1.75 million of their auction proceeds paid for. At that point, you're like, if you're paying, and that's a small percentage too, it's up to 35% or something like that of the auction. So it's kind of like, well, if you're still going to be paying millions of dollars in this auction, why should you be getting applicant support?
Yeah, I think they do have that, there is something in the fine print that if it exceeds, I want to say X amount, I want to say 5 million, but I could be wrong on that, then you're no longer eligible. On the flip side, I think there's also an addition on their yearly ICANN fees as well. So I need to go back and check on that. Don't quote me on that one yet, but I believe there was talk about that. So it should probably be in there. If you get through and you go through the applicant support and you're on an auction, you're in a really great spot in terms of how much money you're actually saving. It's really significant.
Absolutely. Some other things this time around. One thing that to me doesn't seem like it's changed too much is this whole idea of community priority evaluations. And so if you can say that a community supports your string, you can basically get a leg up and actually eliminate some competition that way. So let's say 10 people apply for the same string, and you say, let's pick .crypto. We know that's going to be a very popular one. And before the last round, I would have said, even though .crypto wasn't in the lexicon, I would have said some of these terms that are general, super broad, music or sport or something like that. It's impossible to say it's a community. I was thinking community is more like an indigenous tribe wants to create something, or a particular small language that wants to apply for a domain specifically for people that speak that language. But it ended up being applied much more broadly. And some of these groups were actually able to get community status. And my read on the applicant guidebook is it's still being treated very broadly for this next round. Have you worked with any community applicants? What's your take on that?
So I had a couple in the last round. They are a massive amount of work to get all the letters and to go through the process. The process wasn't as clear. They were very expensive from a legal perspective on what we needed to do. One time we thought we were launching and then, nope, pause. We got to take 2 steps back. We're going back into whatever phase. They'll be clear going forward, but there's also a lot more expense to it. So I think they also have another 50 to 80,000 on top of the application fee to go through that process. So while it's more clear, you're paying a little significantly more to have that option, plus a whole bunch of work.
Sure, but if you could avoid a $10 million, $20 million auction by getting community status, it might be worth the gamble. And I wouldn't be surprised if someone comes out, ironically, given the ethos of crypto, suggesting that they have a crypto community and when they apply for that. So it'll be interesting to see.
For sure. And hopefully this time it's a little bit clearer, more streamlined, so we don't have all the issues that we encountered in the last round.
I think one of the strategies last time was to delay, right? Which is to wear down your opponent, whether it's through CPE, a community priority evaluation or something else, which is, no, I'm going to fight this. I'm going to appeal it. And you're not going to be able to launch your domain for 5, 6, 7, 8 years unless you capitulate. Now, again, there was an option to capitulate in the past that was like, hey, maybe I'm going to pay you something. And that's not an option anymore. So now the only option is you could get tired of fighting it and just withdraw, or you go to the mat all the way. So that'll change things as well.
Yeah.
.crypto, I keep bringing this up because I think it will be one of the more popular ones applied for in this next round. And it goes back to this whole idea. People are saying all the good strings were taken in the first round. So obviously there are some terms that have entered the lexicon since then, like crypto, in terms related to that, blockchain, .block, things like that might be applied for. What do you generally say when people say all the good strings were taken in the first round?
Right to your point of there's a whole bunch of new industries, new technologies, new lexicon words that didn't exist back then. And on top of that, there were a lot of brands who didn't apply last round, whether they chose to not apply and now they understand more the value of why they should apply, or they just simply missed the window thinking it was going to open up again in 2 years, which obviously it didn't. So there's a lot more brands who are going to come in and go, you know something, we want our brand and we want a couple other strings as well. So there's a whole nother world that's going to be rolling out.
Let's talk about .brands for a minute. I had Teresa Swinehart of ICANN on the show a couple of weeks ago talking about kind of a study, a survey they did about .brands, what the opportunities were. A lot of companies applied for .brands last time. Nearly half the applications were for .brands. But it seems like not very many of those applicants have actually put those .brands to use. In fact, about 150 of the delegated strings have actually been canceled by the companies. They've decided they no longer want them. What do you think might be different this time around companies saying, I mean, there are only a few use cases they can look at, in my opinion, that are like, hey, this company really used its .brand. Fox being one, Amazon. What do you think would get brands in this case to say, hey, there is a good opportunity here?
It's already occurring, right? So I think the biggest thing is from a user perspective. So they have users who are now being hurt by being phished. They're going to other sites that aren't their own. The customer journey is difficult and long. They have these sites that you can't find anything, even if you tried it. So people are more concerned about how do we get our customers' trust and what is the easiest way to do it? And the easiest way is go, you know something, if you see .us on the right side of it, it's us. It's a really simple flag. If you see something else like .us, whatever it might be, it's not us. Don't give your credit card information to them. Don't log in with your banking details. Don't do any of that. And so I think that's a real cost to companies, and that's a real benefit a TLD can actually deliver them.
There's already, for example, .bank out there, which is created by the banking industry. And that was one of the arguments. We tell our clients, hey, if it doesn't end in .bank, it's not real. But do you think like the general populace actually understands that? People click on some really weird links. The general populace also has to understand to look for that, right?
They do. And I've seen people where certain brands where they just put it in the bill saying, this is what's coming. They did a little marketing thing. They trained their customers and they just said, here's us. This is where we're going in the future. And we're doing this to protect you. And they just trained them a little bit by giving them a little bit of notice. And in return, they get to reduce their fraud rate significantly, which is a massive expense, which pays for their TLD pretty much instantly. There's that. And then there's just the how many more subscription models do we have today than we did 10 years ago? Everything now is a subscription model. So people want to know, is am I giving my credit card to the right place? Am I at the right place? And they're scared for it. Well, they're nervous, maybe not scared, but they're afraid of giving out their personal information to something that they might not trust.
So you mentioned earlier the projections of about 1,000 top-level domains being applied for in this round. Where does that come from? Is that your projection? Is that someone else's?
No, that's ICANN's conservative projection to make sure that all of their fees, I want to say it was $70 million, is recovered.
Okay. So I noticed in the guidebook, they put a range in there that was to calculate timelines, like how long it'll take to get through certain parts of the process. And they had 500 lower bound. They had 3,500 on the upper bound. I'm curious, what do you think? How many do you think will be applied for?
That's the good question. I'm guessing, if I have to guess, I put the 2,500 mark in there.
So more than last time, you think?
I think so. I know there are a lot of brands who are like, yeah, we want these. Can we get 10? And can we have them in 2 months?
Wow.
And it's like, well, it won't be exactly 2 months, but they understand the value more so than they did before. And they want them. It's the 227,000 isn't a lot of money when you have huge marketing campaigns or you're paying a lot for, say, a couple premium names in the big scheme of things.
It was interesting when I was talking to Teresa, this was another thing that came up, is you're talking about brands that are like, yeah, I want these yesterday, but then they have to wait. To what extent do you think having this windows, these application opportunities, mean it's hard for a company? I mean, usually a company comes up with a plan and they're ready to execute, whereas here it's, all right, now you got to wait. that kind of thing. Wait till next year, and then it's going to be another year. To what extent do you think that has an impact? And do you see a point in the future where it's more of a rolling basis on dot brands?
Ideally, it would be. From my perspective, we always need little rounds. They might be mini rounds or whatever else you want to call them, just to allow potential other applicants to be able to also apply. So I know we talked about it as like just an ongoing application round, but I don't see how that would work really in the real world when, then it's a first come, first served. And so then that would cause a whole bunch more issues than we'd actually be solving in any of it.
Interesting. Yeah, ICANN in Istanbul, I had a panel of new top-level domain operators, existing ones, and asked them about their projections for this round. And I'd say most of them, I need to go back and look at the recording. I think there were between 1 and 3,000. This is where ICANN has put these bounds on there. There was one group that said at first they were thinking it was going to be exponentially higher, like 10,000, but brought that back. I guess Nova Registry has publicly announced plans to apply for about 200. I'm aware of at least one other company that's has ambitions like that. And I'm not talking about one of the existing very large players like Identity Digital. I have no idea what their plans are, but presumably they'll go pretty big. You add those up, then you look at the brands, and you look at the crypto companies like D3 and Unstoppable that have at least announced a lot of strings they plan to go for. At the end of the day, will they, won't they on certain strings? I think that's said plans change, especially in fast moving technology circles. So I think the easy thing is to maybe say, yeah, about as many as last time, which gets you in that 1,500, 2,500 range. I'll be very curious to see. Talking to people like you about brands, which you have a lot more insight. You're actually talking to customers about. It's certainly eye-opening for me as far as thinking about what the potential could be in the next round.
It's actually, we're back to the exciting part of the industry. A dozen years ago, this was really fun and exciting. And then slowly over time, and we just got grinded away on the next round and the guidebook and everything else. And now we're at the cusp of, okay, we're back to exciting again. And it's really great to be able to talk to customers and really be able to go, this is what it can do for you. And you can see them getting excited on it. And then it's more questions and more questions. And it's, okay, yeah, I want 5. And it's like, okay, but you got to wait, right? And don't say anything. Because some of them are like, yeah, I'm going to go and talk to my buddy Fred says this. It's like, zip it with Fred. Like if Fred is your good friend and you're under NDA, great. But other than that, don't go talking to everyone about it unless you have really deep pockets, because you're inviting somebody else to do something similar.
I say, regardless, a lot of people think more new top-level domains are needed. Some people think that's not the case, but I tell people, regardless, there's going to be a lot of attention on domain names over the coming couple of years. I think that's great. I think that's good for our industry, and having those conversations out there will be positive for us. So.
And the other thing that's going to be really interesting is that the industry is going to fundamentally change after this. So we're hearing about registrars going to charge a shelf space kind of fee. So what is that going to do to the industry? That means we're probably going to see more registrars. We could potentially see a lot more innovation. We can see people probably building a little bit more of a community on different things, doing things very different, which means we no longer have to fit within some of these cookie cutters that we have currently. So right now, you're only allowed so many tiers of premium names. You're only allowed to have this type of model. It's a low, a mid, or a high-low, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, you're saying because the registrars are putting these restrictions.
Exactly, right? So think of what happens if that changes. So instead of 80% of the business being done with, say, 20% of the registrars, which is even less in our instance, let's change it up to go, what happens if it's 80% doing 80%? And so that innovation is cool.
Yeah. And, I've mentioned Nova Registry a couple of times because they've been very public about their plans. But those listening to this show, they're thinking about it that way, right? Which is maybe these aren't necessarily sold through a registrar or through the common registrars right now. And I interviewed Yoni Belisov, their founder, on this show a couple months ago, actually right around ICANN in Seattle. So if anyone wants to hear their plans, you can go back to that show from around that time. So one final question for you, Christa. We talked about the cost of the application only being part of it, and there's so much more to it. What's one major area that companies should think about when they're budgeting for new top-level domains?
Just like I would always say is, A, it's a business, but B, you need to go through all your expenses. And one of your biggest line items is going to be your marketing expense. We touched on the whole shelf space, and potentially there's a price to pay in that. But also, how are you reaching your end customers? And really focusing on those aspects, because it's so critical to your business. And in the first round, we didn't have those insights. We just thought if you build it, they will come. And then we learned, okay, when you build it, you're still going to have to build it some more. And it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of energy to do that. So you need to make sure that you're well funded or have at least enough funds to really be able to get your marketing out there, get your name out there, and to really realize your vision of your whole TLD. Because without that, it all falls really quickly.
We certainly learned in the first round that the application is just one piece of the pie or puzzle. You get to that point and there's still a lot of work to do to see that top-level domain ultimately succeed. So really good point. Christa, thanks so much for coming on the show and talking about this. People want to learn more about TLDz, they're just TLDz.com.
Perfect. Whether it's a Z or a Z, it's TLDz.com.
All right.
Thank you, Andrew.
You bet. My guest this week has been Christa Taylor. She is co-founder of TLDz. That's a wrap on this week's Domain Name Wire podcast. You can listen to all previous episodes at dnw.com/podcast or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening.